This is a short tutorial on an improved way that you can procedurally blur textures using Blender Shader Editor. There are two approaches, one which is built on top of the other. The first is fake blur, which is quite common in tutorials and works for anything before Blender 5.0, but has a major problem with some more procedural workflows. And the second is built on top of that and is a way to resolve those problems, but it only uses a feature which is available in the newest versions of Blender. So we have two textures here. We have this logo and we have this procedural brick texture, which I'll just set as 1 for now. So we have these, and what we want to do is we want to distort this UV. So then, based off the pixels sort of being dithered, which is an effect which you can see here, it looks like a blur. Now, follow along even if you're on the Blender 5.0 version, because this is still needed. So what we're going to do is add a vector math snap and set this to 0.01. This is just for demonstration, and we'll be toggling this on and off quite a bit. I'm just going to move some things around so we've got a bit more space to work. So after that, what we want to do is we want to add a vector math add. Plug this into the bottom, we'll leave that for now. And then we want to add a white noise texture. Now, this, if I mute this snap node, plug that in there, there we go. So if I mute this snap node, you can see that the blocks, so to speak, are so small that they might as well just be one wash over the whole thing. But for this is just to showcase it. You can see that each of the blocks is being given a random value on each of the color channels between 0 and 1. What we want to do is we want to do vector math subtract and do subtract 0.5. Then we want to do a vector math and scale. This will allow us to control how intense the blur effect on our texture is. We're going to add some controls down here, one which is just for the scale itself, and one which is a math divide. Plug that in, do divide by 100 just for convenience, and then plug that in. So we've now got a control where we can make this white noise more or less intense across the whole UV that we've got. And we're going to use this to distort this UV, which is at the top here and is going into each of our textures. So we're going to add in a mapping mode. We're going to plug that in here. We're going to put our offset in there into the location, and we're going to set the scale on the Z to be 0, just because we're only using 2D textures. So the result is, you can see I'm going to reduce the intensity of that down to 8. You can see that each of these pixels is being sort of jumbled around and randomly positioned. Sorry, not pixels, but I'm going to call them blocks for now. And if I remove this snap effect, you can see that it looks very similar to a blur. But there is a problem with it, and another thing as well is it does look quite grainy. Now this is again using this dithering, where even though when we don't have any of those sort of greys in between, if we sort of put white and black pixels together very close side by side, it gives the impression of a gradient, and it gives the impression of a blur. And that's the same for this brick texture here. You can see that is getting blurred, but we do have a problem. What we want now is, let's say we've got this brick texture, we plug this in here. This color ramp works exactly as expected, where the gray pixels, so to speak, are dark blue. But what about this one? I'm going to add another one called a threshold texture, which is this custom node group. You can copy it if you want, but it doesn't matter. This is just for demonstration. This is another one where, again, we can see one side of this is pure black, one side of this is pure white, and based off how much we blur it, all the things in between are grey, or at least we'd expect them to be. We plug this in and we'd expect that the black is red, the dark grey is orange, yellow, green, and then pure white is blue. But when we plug that in, it doesn't work. Now, coming back over here and turning on this snap again, you can see why. We've got no grey textures at all. All we've got is pixels that are either pure black or pure white, and this dithering effect doesn't actually make any grey pixels. Now, if you've done some fairly advanced procedural materials before, especially if you start doing things like edges and cavities in 3D and such, and you want a way of being able to blur the intensity of those on the 3D model, this approach just doesn't work. And this is the problem. So, and it's the same for this brick texture, where again, we would expect that the grays, so to speak, let me turn down the intensity of that down to 8. We'd expect these grays to be various red, orange, yellow, green, but no. You can see that instead, oh, that is just because this brick's color is slightly darker. There we go. You can just see that they're either pure red or pure blue. So how can we fix that? It's fairly simple, but this is the point where Blender 5.0 and above is involved. So now, Blender 5.0 has added this repeat zone, which has been in geometry nodes for a while, and people have managed to make some really good stuff with it, but this is a fairly simple use without going into super complex territory. We're just going to experiment on this brick texture for the time being. So shuffle everything over here, and we're going to have this so that then, one moment, we've got the repeat zone here and here. So we want to plug in this mapping node into our brick texture again. What we now want to do is we want to add in a value. We're going to call this samples. We're going to add in a math seal node, so we're rounding it up, so it's always an integer. Plugging that in there. And then we're going to do a combine x, y, z. Plug this into this z. And then plug this into the add. Now, at this point, if you're previewing any other textures using Node Wrangler, you might notice that this line shows up as red. Just make sure you're not previewing anything using the material outputs. Just get rid of that. And all of this should bundle itself together into a group. Now, the next thing that we want to do is do a vector math plug. So this, again, this can be whatever texture we want to blur. Plug this color into the bottom here, and plug this vector into the top here. You'll now notice that we've got this new socket over here. And all we need to do is take this and plug that into the add over here. Now the final step which we've got is vector math divide. And we're going to plug this into the top and make sure it is the top. And we're going to plug the seal over here all the way over into the bottom. So one moment, I'll bunch these together. If you want to sort of screenshot or anything like that, this is the completed group. There you are. Now, let's have a look at this in action. So we've got our divide over here, and it will be pure black right now because the samples are 0. But if I set it to 1, we have the sort of same effects as we saw before. And if I turn on this snap node, you can again see we've got either pure black or pure white. Now, this is similar to how 3D samples work. If I do S8 here and do rendered mode, you can see that because I've got 188 samples, there are sort of varying grays as the samples increase. But if I set the samples to just 1, you can see, again, they are pure black or pure white. Samples in cycles do not affect the material. Materials, the way that you can think about it is they only really have one sample internally. It's an oversimplification, but it's close enough. So you can see right now, we're running one sample on this material. But if we do 2, you can see that we're averaging it out, and we actually are getting those grays. That is being rounded up so that is 2. So let's set that to 32 or 64. Now you'll notice that there is a problem when you go above a certain threshold. That's just a bug in cycles as it is right now. Eevee doesn't have this problem, so if you go into material preview, you can set this up as high or as low as you want. But cycles, I believe that's something which is going to come in the future, but you do need to be conscious as to how many times this can be repeated. So for now, we'll just continue using Eevee, using material preview. I'm going to set that to 256. So Now I've got this for the sake of the blur, which I'll move this over here and I will call that blur amount. Take that, and we've got both of our controls right here. So now we've got the exact same thing as before, where we've got how much we want to blur our texture, and we also have this new thing for samples. You can see that the blocks are still there, but that's just because I've got this snap on, so I'm going to turn that off. And now you'll notice that this works exactly as we'd expect it to. So there's none of the fake dithering. You can see that this goes from as it works before, but as well as that, if I go here, you can see now it is actually going from red, orange, yellow, green, and then blue. If we were to swap out this brick texture for something else, like that threshold texture which we had earlier, again, you can see the exact same thing, where we've got that correct transition between the two. And then if I do an image and I use a logo that I've got, plug this in, plug that in there. Obviously this isn't something which needs to go into that gradient, so we'll just preview this. You can see that we've got a much nicer blur, which has a bit less of that visual noise as we had before, where it looks like this. YouTube streaming might butcher that a bit, but there is a lot of visual noise here. This, we can increase the samples, so then we've got smoother results. But it is also one where if you want to use this with any advanced procedural materials, this works much better with it. And yeah, this is the new approach. Thanks for watching.